Hello everyone, it's everybody's favorite day, Tip Tuesday, and today I will be walking you through a couple of tips on the equipment screen. Some of these you've probably already known about for a while now, but we're just going to do a recap of everything because why not? So we'll start off with some pretty basic ones and then get into some a little more well-kept secrets of the equipment screen here. So of course everyone knows about the create a new equipment button up here. This is probably the fastest way to create equipment. It's going to be a completely blank record like the one you see on your screen. It'll just populate the very bare bones information. You give it a name, you pick the company, it gives the current date as the purchase date and the in-service date, calls it a new equipment, and that's pretty much it. Everything else you see here is set to the default option. If you want a little bit more advanced way of creating equipment, you probably know about this as well. You can go ahead and fire off a new equipment based on a template using the second button here. So that one will pop up the template selection list. You can pick all your templates that you have here, create a new ID, give it a new serial number, and actually default all the information related to it. So we'll go ahead and call this Tip Tuesday 2. And we'll just give it a 2, 4, 5, something really basic here. You can create any number of them, give it an auto number scheme, a bunch more advanced options here, but we'll just go ahead and fire that off. And just give it a second to catch up to us. Just another second, I guess. And you can see here it defaults all your information. Pretty simple stuff, everyone knows about that already. But moving forward, we have the delete current equipment. That's a pretty standard one people know about too. Probably don't want to be using this button for deleting equipment unless you really know what you're doing. Instead, you can use the export import module to export and delete from database certain pieces of equipment. I think I have a video on that actually in another Tip Tuesday, so you can check that one out. You have your navigation buttons, also really simple stuff everyone knows about. The recall recently viewed equipment. This is something that maybe sometimes users wouldn't recognize this unless they've seen someone else do it before. But you can actually jump to equipment that you've seen in the past here. So we could hop back to our Tip Tuesday. It records a handful of them, so you can kind of jump around if you're working between a bunch of different gauges at the same time. This next button, this is not as commonly used, but people probably still know about it. You can save your current piece of equipment as a template. So if you create something from template, add a bunch of new stuff, maybe change a couple of other things, you can go ahead and save that as a new template. Maybe you want to keep the old one, but you also kind of want a more specialized version if you're going to be creating more pieces of equipment like this. So let's say we change up the manufacturer, the model number, description, stuff like that. We could save this as a template and call it the Midatorio gauge template number 2 instead of the current caliper one we're using here. Next, you can modify the ID for the current company. This is pretty much the only way you can do that, and it'll actually go through a process of validating that ID throughout the rest of the software. Most people do know about this. As we move along, though, we'll see the cloning wizard, a little bit rarer of a tool. You can use this button to clone the current tool that you're on and just give it a new ID. So we'll just say this is going to be our Tip Tuesday 3. Nothing too fancy there. You can give it a new serial number. So this is if maybe you don't want to create a whole new template to base this gauge off of, but if you want to create a whole other caliper and you've changed a lot of fields and you don't want to go back and use the template again and have to change all them again, you could just clone this equipment. Pretty simple stuff. Next, you can print a worksheet. So if you've got your worksheet set up in your print builder, you can actually just go ahead and print off a worksheet and get it ready for calibration. It's another simple tool that I feel like people don't use as often as they could be. And then here at the end of the buttons at the top, we have our order system, create a new work order for this company. So what this will do is actually create a new work order. A lot of people have receiving events and check-in events and stuff like that set up to already do this, and this is only in the commercial Cow Lab version of the software. But they could also just fire it off with this button here if you don't want to go through the whole receiving process. If maybe you just got a rush order, you just got to create the order, throw a gauge on it, do the calibration, turn it around real quick. You can do it through this button here. Something else that's pretty cool is if you right click, you get a bunch of options here. Most of this pertains to the layout stuff, and we won't get into any of that. But down here, actually, you have the Bookmark Current Equipment button here. So this is something some people might not know about, is you can actually just bookmark this, and you can leave it as bookmarked indefinitely, basically. And you can jump to any number of gauges from your recalled list. Maybe you get so many different gauges that your bookmark equipment no longer appears here. Now, you can always return to this equipment by clicking the Return to Bookmark Equipment button here. So you can have one bookmark piece of equipment at a time. Sometimes people will have a special tool that they have. Maybe it's a test tool if you're like an admin, you're creating a new config and you always want to be able to jump back to it pretty quickly. You can bookmark that, and then you can always kind of bounce back and create it as like a home gauge, So even if it's not in your recalled list, you can just jump straight back to it. Now, the last tip here is something that I myself learned pretty recently. Instead of going through the, clicking a bunch of options and starting a search, you could just start typing on the equipment screen. So if I just started typing with, TIP, it'll pull up the search by ID automatically. So that's something even I didn't know about and has been in the software for quite a while. So maybe that'll help, increase the amount of time you have, because you won't be spending so much time, going to the event or the search reports and doing equipment finder or hitting your hotkey, getting your fingers right on the keyboard. You can just start typing and pull up whatever you want, basically. So that about does it. That's just, some quick ways to navigate around the equipment screen. If you get good at these, you should be able to bounce around a bunch of different gauges pretty fast. So I hope this was informative for you and you can apply it in your daily workload. And as always, I'll see you next time, and happy calibrating.